Did you know that one of the most beloved romantic movies ever made was almost destroyed before it even reached the screen? Roman Holiday, released in 1953, looks like a simple, sweet love story. But behind those sunny Roman streets and beautiful smiles, there were secrets, fights, stolen careers, and one of the greatest acts of courage in Hollywood history. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about Roman Holiday. Number 20. Script had a ghostwriter, and he couldn't even claim it. Imagine spending months writing something beautiful, something that would eventually win the highest award in Hollywood, and being forced to hide in the shadows while someone else took the credit. Exactly what happened with Roman Holiday, and it is one of the most painful and fascinating stories in all of cinema history. The script for Roman Holiday was written by a man named Dalton Trumbo. He was one of the most talented screenwriters in Hollywood at the time. His words were sharp, his stories were human, and his characters felt alive. Early 1950s, something terrible was happening in America. A powerful political movement called McCarthyism was spreading fear across the country. Government officials were accusing artists, writers, and filmmakers of being communists. They created a list, a blacklist, of people who were banned from working in Hollywood. Dalton Trumbo was on that list. He had done nothing wrong. He had simply believed in certain political ideas, which was his right as a human being. Fear was too strong. Studios were terrified of being connected to anyone on the blacklist. So when Dalton Trumbo wrote the script for Roman Holiday, he could not use his real name. Instead, another writer named Ian McClellan Hunter agreed to put his name on the script. Ian became the official writer on paper, even though Dalton had done the real work. Roman Holiday won the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay in 1954. Ian McClellan Hunter walked up to collect the award. Trumbo sat at home, invisible. An unfair moment wrapped inside a glorious one. Decades later, long after the blacklist ended and Trumbo's name was finally cleared, the Academy officially recognized him as the true writer of the screenplay. In 2011, the Writers Guild of America went further and gave the award credit back to Trumbo permanently. Taken nearly 60 years, but the truth finally came out. The man's name was hidden. His words lived forever on screen. What looked like a simple award ceremony was actually a cover for one of Hollywood's greatest injustices. Number 19. Audrey Hepburn was an unknown and almost didn't get the role. You think of Roman Holiday today, it is impossible to imagine anyone other than Audrey Hepburn playing Princess Anne. She owns every single frame of that film. Her eyes, her smile, her voice, everything about her feels made for that role. But when director William Wyler first began searching for the right actress, Audrey Hepburn was barely known. She was a young Belgian-born actress who had done some small stage work in London and a few tiny film roles in Europe. She was not a Hollywood star. She was not even close. William Wyler had already considered bigger, more famous names for the part. Studio Paramount Pictures was nervous about casting an unknown. They wanted someone the audience would recognize. They wanted a safe choice. But Wyler kept looking. Then one day, a screen test changed everything. A screen test is a short-filmed audition. The director films the actor performing scenes from the script to see how they look and feel on camera. Audrey Hepburn came in for her test, and something magical happened. When the cameras finished rolling, the crew told Audrey she could relax. But here is the twist. They secretly kept the camera running. Without Audrey knowing she was still being filmed, she began to laugh, stretch, ask questions, and just be herself. The camera caught all of it. When William Wyler watched that extra footage, he was stunned. The real Audrey was even more captivating than the performed Audrey. She had a natural glow that could not be taught or faked. Wyler immediately knew she was the one. He cast her without hesitation. That secret camera moment was the real audition. And it launched one of the greatest careers in movie history. What started as a nervous young woman trying to find work became the birth of a legend. That hidden camera didn't just find an actress. It found a star. Number 18. The movie was shot entirely in Rome, a very bold decision. In the early 1950s, Hollywood studios had a specific way of doing things. If a movie was set in Paris, they built Paris on a lot in California. If a movie was set in ancient Rome, they constructed columns and fountains on a studio stage. Everything was controlled, contained, and fake in a very professional way. It was safe, predictable, and expensive in a different kind of way. But director William Wyler had a different idea. He wanted to actually go to Rome. He wanted real cobblestones under his actors' feet. He wanted real sunlight bouncing off real ancient buildings. This was a bold and somewhat risky decision. Filming on location in a foreign country meant dealing with crowds, unpredictable weather, noise, and 1,000 small logistical problems that would never happen on a studio lot. But Wyler believed it was worth it. And he was right. Roman holiday today. The city of Rome is not just a setting, it is almost a character in the story itself. The streets breathe, the piazzas hum with life, the old stones carry weight and history. A studio set could never replicate that feeling. Wyler brought his cast and crew across the Atlantic Ocean and filmed the movie using real Roman locations throughout the city. Local people walked through scenes. Street vendors appeared in the background. The texture of real life made everything more believable. It was harder. It was unpredictable. But it was absolutely beautiful. What looked effortless on screen was actually a massive organizational challenge every single day of filming. He made the movie, and the movie made the city even more. Number 17. Gregory Peck demanded that Audrey's name appear equal to his in Hollywood. Billing is everything. Billing means whose name appears on the poster, in what size, and in what order. For decades, Hollywood had very strict rules about this. Biggest star always got top billing. Their name appeared first, largest, and most prominently. Everyone else came after. When Roman Holiday began production, Gregory Peck was already one of the most respected actors in Hollywood. He had been in major films, he had a devoted audience, and he had serious clout. His name above the title was expected. Nobody questioned it. Then something happened during filming that changed Gregory Peck's thinking entirely. He watched Audrey Hepburn work. He saw what she was doing, the natural grace, the perfect instinct, the way she brought genuine emotion to every single scene. And Greg Peck, a man who had earned his own stardom through years of hard work, recognized something rare. Turned to his agent and said something that almost nobody in Hollywood would ever say in that situation, that Audrey Hepburn would win the Academy Award for this film, and that her name should be shown alongside his equally. He was not wrong. Audrey Hepburn did win the Academy Award for Best Actress for Roman Holiday. She became a superstar overnight. But the remarkable part of this story is what Peck did before anyone even knew that would happen. He advocated for equal billing for a completely unknown actress when he had no obligation to do so. It was a generous, perceptive, and deeply human gesture. His name still appeared first on the poster, but Audrey's name appeared right beside his, in the same size. In an industry built on ego, Gregory Peck showed something rarer than talent. He showed character. What could have been a one-name poster became the launching pad of a legend. Number 16. Famous Mouth of Truth scene was not fully scripted. The most beloved and famous scenes in Roman Holiday takes place at a carved stone face in Rome called La Bocca della Verità, which means the mouth of truth. According to old Roman legend, if you put your hand inside the stone mouth and you are telling a lie, the mouth will bite your hand off. In the film, Joe Bradley, played by Gregory Peck, and Princess Anne, played by Audrey Hepburn, visit this famous landmark. Joe puts his hand inside the mouth and then dramatically pretends that the stone has bitten his hand off. He screams and pulls back a handless arm. Hepburn's reaction, a genuine burst of shock and then laughter, is one of the most delightful moments in the entire film. Here is the secret that makes it even better. Gregory Peck did not tell Audrey Hepburn what he was going to do. Her shocked reaction, her wide eyes, her sudden jump, and then helpless laughter, none of it was acting. It was completely real. Peck had quietly arranged the trick with the director, and Audrey had no idea it was coming. The camera caught pure, unfiltered human surprise. You watch that scene, you're not watching two characters interact. You are watching a real moment between two real people. That is why it feels so alive and so magical, even after all these decades. The directors could have scripted a reaction. They could have asked Audrey to pretend to be shocked. But real surprise is something that cannot be faked, not even by the greatest actor in the world. Looked like playful acting was actually a perfectly planned moment of genuine surprise. Number 15. William Wyler. Had one of the most demanding reputations in Hollywood. If you were cast in a William Wyler film, you knew two things. First, your performance would probably be extraordinary. Second, getting there was going to be exhausting. William Wyler was famous, or perhaps infamous, for demanding take after take after take. He would film the same scene 20, 30, sometimes 40 times. Actors grew frustrated. Crew members grew weary. But the results on screen were almost always remarkable. His films had a quality of depth and naturalism that other directors rarely achieved. Audrey Hepburn, a relative newcomer to film, found herself working under this legendary perfectionist on one of her first major movie experiences. She had to learn to perform the same moment over and over again while keeping it fresh, natural, and genuine. That is one of the hardest things an actor can do. Most actors lose the feeling after a few takes. But Wyler pushed until he found the version that had exactly the quality he was looking for. There is a famous story from the set where Wyler would finish a take, say nothing, and simply ask to do it again. When actors asked what was wrong, he would say he was not sure yet, but he would know when he saw it. That kind of direction could drive a person mad. But it also forced actors to go deeper, try different things, and sometimes find something completely unexpected in the material. Audrey Hepburn later spoke about Wyler with enormous respect. She said that working with him taught her how to trust herself in front of the camera. It was difficult, demanding, and relentless, but the movie that came out of that pressure is still considered one of the most perfectly crafted romantic films ever made. Hard work made beautiful work. That was William Wyler's philosophy, and he never apologized for it. Number 14. The film was shot in black and white. By choice, not by accident. By the early 1950s, color film was becoming more widely available and more affordable. Many studios were beginning to shoot their big productions in color because audiences loved the visual excitement. It felt modern. Color felt like the future. So when Paramount Pictures considered shooting Roman Holiday in color, it seemed like an obvious and natural choice. Rome, after all, is one of the most visually stunning cities on earth. Imagine the golden sunlight on ancient stone walls, the warm red rooftops, the bright flowers in the markets. color would have been breathtaking. But director William Wyler chose black and white instead. And it was absolutely the right decision. His reasoning was connected to the mood and tone of the story. Roman Holiday is a bittersweet film at its heart. It is about a brief, beautiful, impossible love story between two people who can never truly be together. The story ends not with joy, but with a quiet, aching kind of sadness. It would have made the film feel lighter, more cheerful, almost like a vacation postcard. Black and white gave it weight. It gave the story a timeless, dreamlike quality, as though the events were happening in a world slightly removed from ordinary life. The shadows, the contrasts, the play of light across Audrey Hepburn's face became more poetic in black and white. The city of Rome, stripped of color, became something almost mythological rather than just a tourist destination. Wyler understood that sometimes removing something adds more than putting something in. What could have been colorful and cheerful became elegant and eternal instead. One creative choice made all the difference. Number 13. Audrey Hepburn's real hair was cut on camera. There is a scene in Roman Holiday where Princess Anne, disguised as an ordinary girl for the day, decides to cut her long princess hair into a short, playful style. She sits down in a chair at a street-side barber shop, and the hairdresser cuts her hair short. The scene feels spontaneous and joyful on screen, but what very few people know is that the hair being cut was actually Audrey Hepburn's real hair. This was not a wig. This was not a film trick. The hairdresser in the scene was a real Italian hairdresser, and the cut happening on screen was genuinely happening in real life. At the time, short hair on a woman, especially cut so casually and publicly, was considered quite bold and unconventional. Long, styled hair was considered proper and feminine by the standards of the era. For Audrey Hepburn to sit down and have her hair cut short was a statement in itself, even if it was framed within the story as a princess's act of playful rebellion. The result was a hairstyle that would go on to become iconic. Millions of women around the world copied what became known as the Hepburn cut. It influenced fashion for decades. It appeared in magazines, on runways, and in salons across the globe. And it all began with a pair of scissors, a real barber, and an actress willing to let the moment be genuinely real. What started as a simple story choice became one of the most influential haircuts in fashion history. Sometimes reality creates more magic than any costume department ever could. Number 12. The movie launched a new kind of romantic film. Before Roman Holiday, Hollywood romantic films usually followed a predictable pattern. Boy meets girl. Problems arise. Problems are solved. Boy gets girl. Happiness forever. The ending was almost always tied up neatly with a bow. Audiences were comfortable with this formula, and studios kept delivering it because it sold tickets. Roman Holiday did something different and daring. It told a love story that did not end happily, not in the traditional sense anyway. Joe Bradley and Princess Anne fall in love during one magical day in Rome, but at the end of the film they say goodbye, knowing they can never be together. She must return to her royal duties. He must return to his ordinary life. They part ways quietly, beautifully, and heartbreakingly. No grand declaration, no last-minute rescue, no dramatic reunion. Just two people who love each other, choosing duty and reality over desire. This kind of ending was unusual for the time. It asked the audience to feel something more complicated than simple happiness. It asked them to appreciate a love story that was beautiful precisely because it could not last. Actor William Wyler and writer Dalton Trumbo were saying something true about life, that some of the most meaningful moments are the ones that cannot be held on to. This approach influenced an enormous number of films that came after. Romantic drama, the bittersweet love story, the ending that leaves you aching with feeling. Roman Holiday helped create that entire tradition. It proved that audiences could handle emotional complexity, and they more than handled it. They loved it. An ending with no happy resolution became one of cinema's most beloved finales. Number 11. Gregory Peck was already an Oscar-nominated actor before this film. It is easy looking back to think of Roman Holiday as primarily Audrey Hepburn's film. And in many ways, her performance is the beating heart of the story. But Gregory Peck brought something absolutely essential to the film, and his own remarkable career history made him the perfect partner for Hepburn's debut. By the time Roman Holiday was made, Gregory Peck had already received 4 Academy Award nominations. He had starred in major, serious films. He was known for playing men of integrity, quiet strength, and deep moral conviction. He was one of Hollywood's most trusted leading men. When he agreed to play Joe Bradley, a somewhat ordinary, slightly cynical newspaper journalist, he was deliberately choosing a more relaxed, lighter role than his usual serious performances. Audiences were delighted to see this towering, distinguished actor being playful and charming and gently funny. He brought credibility to the film without overshadowing Audrey Hepburn's extraordinary work. There is something beautiful about how the two of them worked together on screen. Peck was steady and grounded. Hepburn was luminous and surprising. They balanced each other perfectly, like 2 instruments in a duet. Neither one competed with the other. Neither one showed off. They simply told the story together with honesty and grace. Peck went on to win his own Academy Award the following year for another film, To Kill a Mockingbird. But many film lovers consider his work in Roman Holiday to be some of his most genuinely warm and human screen work. He was not trying to be magnificent. He was just being real, and that was exactly what the film needed. Number 10. The film won 3 Academy Awards. When Roman Holiday arrived in cinemas in 1953, audiences were immediately enchanted. Critics praised it, the public embraced it, and when the Academy Awards season came around, the film received 10 nominations, a remarkable achievement for any film, but especially remarkable for a romantic drama shot on location in a foreign country with an unknown leading actress. Out of those 10 nominations, the film won 3 Academy Awards. The first win was for Best Actress in a Leading Role, which went to Audrey Hepburn. It was one of the fastest rises to the top of Hollywood that anyone could remember. 1 film, 1 performance, and an Oscar. The second win was for Best Costume Design in a Black and White Film. The elegant, simple clothes worn by Audrey Hepburn throughout the movie were designed by Edith Head, one of the most celebrated costume designers in Hollywood history. The clothes Hepburn wore in this film, the simple white shirt, the full skirt, the ballet flats, became enormously influential in fashion. The third win was for Best Writing and Original Screenplay, which went officially to Ian McClellan Hunter, the frontman for the blacklisted Dalton Trumbo. As mentioned earlier, this credit was eventually corrected decades later. In the moment, the award represented the quality of writing that Trumbo had brought to the story. 3 wins from 10 nominations. That is a remarkable success rate. Each of those wins represented something bigger than a golden statue. They represented talent, courage, and creativity coming together in one unforgettable film. Number 8. The story was originally developed for a different kind of film. The story of Roman Holiday had an interesting journey before it became the film that we know today. When Dalton Trumbo first developed the idea, it was originally conceived as a more straightforward romantic comedy with a lighter, more playful tone. The deeper, more bittersweet emotional quality that the final film carries was something that evolved over time as the script was developed and refined. Versions of the story passed through different hands, and the emotional weight of the ending, the quiet, aching farewell between the princess and the journalist, was something that went through significant discussion and debate during the development process. Some people involved in early production conversations felt that audiences needed a happier ending. Hollywood at the time believed firmly in the power of the feel-good conclusion. Giving the audience a sad ending, or even a bittersweet one, felt risky. Audiences felt cheated. What if they left the cinema feeling disappointed rather than uplifted? William Wyler pushed back against this thinking. He believed the honesty of the ending was what made the story meaningful. A princess cannot simply abandon her life and run off with a journalist. The weight of duty is real. The sacrifice is real. Watering it down would have betrayed the integrity of the story. He fought for the ending that we now know and love, and he was right to fight. The final scene of Roman Holiday, where Princess Anne walks away alone through the empty press room, is one of the most quietly devastating and beautiful endings in cinema history. Been comfortable became unforgettable instead. Number 7. Audrey Hepburn had a difficult childhood that shaped her performance. Audrey Hepburn played Princess Anne in Roman Holiday. There is something in her eyes that goes beyond acting. There is a genuine quality of longing, a real feeling of wanting to be free, wanting to be seen, wanting to be ordinary in the most extraordinary way. Many film scholars and people who knew Hepburn well have suggested that this depth came from her own real-life experiences. Audrey Hepburn was born in Belgium in 1929. During the Second World War, she was a young child living in German-occupied Netherlands. She experienced real hunger, real fear, and real loss during those years. The war affected her deeply and permanently. Food was so scarce that she and her family sometimes survived on tulip bulbs and grass. She witnessed suffering and danger that no child should ever experience. These experiences gave her something that cannot be taught in any acting class, a deep, bone-level understanding of what it means to be trapped, to be constrained, to desperately want something more than your circumstances allow. When Princess Anne looks out the window of the royal palace with that aching, wistful expression, there is real feeling behind it. When she laughs freely on the streets of Rome, the joy feels real because it echoes something Audrey Hepburn herself understood. The sweetness of ordinary freedom after years of fear and restriction. Her childhood did not break her. It gave her a quality of emotional truth that made her one of the most beloved actresses in history. The performance was genuine because the feeling was genuine. Number 5. The film established Rome as the ultimate romantic destination. Before Roman Holiday, Rome was certainly known as a great European city. It had ancient history, magnificent architecture, and extraordinary food. Tourists visited, of course, but the idea of Rome as the ultimate city of romantic adventure, the place where you might have a magical, unexpected love story, was not yet fully established in popular culture. Roman Holiday changed that completely. The film showed the world a version of Rome that was intimate, playful, and deeply human. The hidden courtyards, the ancient fountains, the outdoor cafes, the winding streets where history breathes through every stone. All of it was captured with love and care by William Wyler's cameras. When audiences around the world watched Princess Anne and Joe Bradley discover joy together in the streets of Rome, they wanted to be there. They wanted to stand at the mouth of truth, ride a Vespa past the Colosseum, eat gelato by a fountain, and feel that particular kind of Roman magic. Tourism to Rome increased significantly in the years following the film's release. The city became associated in people's minds with romance, freedom, and the idea that one extraordinary day could change everything. The Mouth of Truth, already an ancient landmark, became one of Rome's most visited tourist attractions, specifically because of Roman holiday. And Rome made the movie more beautiful. It was the most perfect partnership between a city and a story. Number 4. William Wyler and Audrey Hepburn had a complex working relationship. We have already talked about William Wyler's demanding reputation as a director. But the specific dynamic between Wyler and Audrey Hepburn during the production of Roman Holiday was something quite particular and worth exploring more deeply. Recognized immediately that Hepburn had an extraordinary natural gift. He also recognized that she was inexperienced in front of a film camera, and that she had habits and instincts developed from stage work that did not always translate directly to the more intimate medium of cinema. Film acting is smaller than stage acting. The camera catches tiny things, a flicker of the eyes, a slight tension in the jaw, the way a person breathes. Stage acting projects outward. Film acting goes inward. Wyler spent enormous amounts of time working with Hepburn to help her trust the camera, to stop projecting, to simply be rather than perform. This process was sometimes frustrating and sometimes emotional. Hepburn was a deeply conscientious performer who genuinely wanted to do her best work. When takes were repeated again and again, she worked hard to understand what Wyler was looking for. Communication between them was not always easy, but it was always honest. Years later, Audrey Hepburn credited Wyler as one of the most important influences on her understanding of film acting. She said he taught her to be still, to trust silence, and to let the camera find her rather than reaching for the camera. And stayed with her throughout her entire career. A difficult teacher created a remarkable student, and together they made something that has lasted for more than 70 years. Number 3. The ending was almost changed, and that would have ruined everything we have touched on the ending of Roman Holiday in earlier facts, but the full story of the battle to keep that ending intact deserves its own dedicated moment. When the film was approaching its final stages of production and preparing for release, there were serious discussions at the studio level about changing the final scene. Studio executives were nervous. They had marketing concerns. They believed, based on their experience with audiences, that people wanted to leave the cinema feeling good. The ending of Roman Holiday, where Princess Anne and Joe Bradley say goodbye forever and she walks away alone, was sad. Not devastatingly sad, but quietly, honestly sad in the way that real life is sometimes sad. Executives suggested various alternative endings. Some proposals involved Joe finding a way to be with Anne, involved a more ambiguous final scene that could be interpreted as hopeful. Suggested a brief epilogue showing the two of them meeting again in some way. Wyler rejected all of these suggestions. He argued passionately and persistently that the integrity of the story demanded honesty. Anne has a duty to her country and her people. That duty is real, and it is serious. A story that pretends she can simply abandon it for personal happiness would be dishonest. It would also be disrespectful to the audience. Wyler believed audiences were intelligent and emotionally capable people who could handle and would appreciate a story that told the truth. He won the argument. The ending stayed exactly as he intended. And when audiences saw the film, they responded with exactly the emotion Wyler had trusted them to feel. The quiet, aching final scene became one of the most discussed and admired endings in cinema history. Keeping honesty meant keeping greatness. Number 2, Audrey Hepburn won the Oscar, Tony, and more, all in 1 year. The year 1954 was unlike any other year in Audrey Hepburn. In fact, it was unlike any other year in the life of almost any entertainer in history. Holiday had been released in 1953, and as the awards season came around, the response was overwhelming. Audrey Hepburn had been performing simultaneously in a Broadway stage play called Undine, while also filming Roman Holiday. This meant she was working at an extraordinary level on 2 entirely different projects in 2 entirely different performance mediums at the same time. The results in both cases were exceptional. At the Academy Awards, she won Best Actress for Roman Holiday. At the Tony Awards, which honor Broadway theater, she won Best Actress in a play for Undine. Winning the Oscar and the Tony in the same year for different projects is something almost no performer has ever achieved. Only a tiny handful of artists in history have managed to win both awards in the same 12 months. And Audrey Hepburn did it in her very first major film role and her first major Broadway role simultaneously. The entertainment world was astonished. Critics tried to find the words to describe what they were witnessing. They eventually settled on calling her a once-in-a-generation talent, which still feels like an understatement. She was 24 years old. She had come from a childhood shaped by war and hunger, and in the space of a single year, she became one of the most celebrated performers on the planet. What looked like a beginning was actually a masterpiece arriving all at once. Number 1, Roman Holiday. Almost did not get made. A studio nearly canceled it. The most important fact in this entire collection is also the most sobering one. Roman Holiday, the film that launched Audrey Hepburn, won 3 Academy Awards, changed fashion, made Rome famous, and told one of cinema's most beloved love stories. Almost never got made at all. The obstacles facing the production were numerous and serious from the very beginning. First, the script was written by a blacklisted writer who could not put his name on it. This added legal and ethical complications to the project from day one. Second, the lead actress was completely unknown, which made the studio nervous about financial risk. Third, the director wanted to film entirely on location in a foreign country, which was expensive, logistically complicated, and considered by many to be an unnecessary risk. Fourth, the story did not have a happy ending, which went against everything Hollywood studios believed audiences wanted. Fifth, the film was going to be shot in black and white at a time when color was becoming the exciting new standard. Every single one of these elements was considered a risk factor. At various points in the film's development, studio executives questioned whether the project was financially viable. At one point, Paramount Pictures considered shelving the project entirely and cutting their losses before production went further. But William Wyler believed in it. The writers believed in it. Gregory Peck believed in it enough to insist on equal billing for an unknown actress, and eventually Paramount agreed to move forward. The film was made, it was released, and it became one of the most beloved and culturally significant films of the 20th century. Every risk they took was the right risk. Every unconventional choice they made was the right choice. What almost became nothing became everything. Bonus fact: the secret life of the film. After the credits. Here is one final story that most fans of Roman Holiday have never heard. Long after the film was released and celebrated and placed in cinema history, there remained a quiet, ongoing consequence of its creation that continued to ripple through lives and careers for decades. The story of Dalton Trumbo and the Blacklist did not end when Roman Holiday won its award under Ian McClellan Hunter's name. Trumbo continued to write films using fake names and front men throughout the 1950s. He became one of the most prolific and successful screenwriters working under false identities during one of Hollywood's most shameful periods. He wrote films that won awards, films that audiences loved, films that shaped American cinema, and his name appeared on none of them. But Trumbo kept writing because he believed in storytelling. He believed that stories could survive even when the storyteller was forced to be invisible. The situation began to change in 1960 when director Otto Preminger publicly announced that Dalton Trumbo had written the screenplay for the major Hollywood film Exodus. And then actor and producer Kirk Douglas announced that Trumbo had written the script for the epic film Spartacus. These public announcements broke the back of the Blacklist. Suddenly, the wall of silence began to crumble. Other blacklisted writers came forward. The industry began to reckon with what it had done. And slowly, painfully, the stolen credits began to be returned to their rightful owners. When Roman Holiday's screenplay credit was officially restored to Dalton Trumbo decades later, it was not just a correction on a piece of paper. It was an acknowledgement that art is stronger than fear. That stories outlast the people who try to suppress them. That a writer working in secret, under threat, with no recognition, can still create something so beautiful that it outlasts all the injustice done against. Trumbo's words gave life to Princess Anne, to Joe Bradley, to One Magical Day in Rome that millions of people have carried in their hearts for more than 70 years. His name was hidden, but his voice was never silenced. Old words, new justice, one story that refused to disappear. Roman Holiday is more than a love story. It is a story about freedom. The kind of freedom that most of us take for granted every single day. It is about one person who lived inside golden walls and dreamed of something as simple as eating gelato alone by a fountain. It is about the courage to choose joy, even for just one day, even when you know it cannot last. But it is also about the people behind the camera. The writer who gave his words to a story and could not claim them. The director who refused to make easy choices. The actress who had survived a war and brought that survival into every scene she played. The actor who quietly, generously gave a younger talent the recognition she deserved. Every person who worked on Roman Holiday made a choice to do the harder, braver, more honest thing. And because of those choices, a film was made that has outlasted all of them and will outlast all of us. It reminds us that beauty matters, that honesty matters, that love, even temporary, even impossible, is worth celebrating. The streets of Rome are still there, the stones are still warm, and somewhere in those cobblestone alleys, a princess is still riding a Vespa, still laughing, still free. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth, and we'll keep uncovering them, one story at a time.